the Epstein client list has just been released. Is there anything, particularly with regards to Prince Andrew, anything that we can glean from it?
Andrew has been a frequent and close personal friend of Jeffrey Epstein, and really it makes his excuses, his explanation for what happened, increasingly threadbare. For example, he told a famous interview on BBC with Emily Maitlis that he'd gone to New York to break off his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Most people, when they want to break a relationship, either just stop talking to someone, or they'll send an email or speak on the phone. They don't go to New York for 3 days and stay with the person they're allegedly breaking up with. So everything Andrew has said stretches credibility, and the fact that he's now being mentioned in these new court documents just reinforces the fact that he is beyond the pale. There's no way back for him in the royal family. Charles was very unwise, in my view, to allow him to parade with the royal family at Christmas, going to church, which presumably Charles was trying to ease him back in, because that's Charles's habit. We saw it, by the way, with Michael Fawcett. We've seen it with Camilla. When people are out of fashion, he lets some time pass and then gradually brings them back in. That's his habit. He was doing the same thing with Andrew. And clearly that's not going to work. And Charles is actually, in my view, damaging and endangering the monarchy by continuing to associate with his brother, who really should be persona non grata, should have his titles removed, should be chucked out of his 31-bedroom house in Royal Lodge, and he should go off and do some charity work, which is, after all, what, say, John Profumo did in the 1960s. You go and rehabilitate yourself quietly behind the scenes, and maybe 10 years on, people will listen to you. He hasn't done that. And for the royal family, this is more of the same stuff being dredged up, which is unhelpful to them and unhelpful to Charles, actually.
Well, you know what's interesting with regards to what you're saying about Charles very slowly trying to get him back into the fold? When Charles ascended to the throne, I gather that he was saying that he wanted a smaller royal family. So it should have been easier, actually, to just say, listen, Andrew, mate, you're on the sidelines from now on. So it's sort of a contradiction, isn't it?
Well, look, Charles alleged, had it put out that he wanted to have a slimmed-down monarchy. His idea of a slimmed-down monarchy, it appears, is having fewer people on the balcony at Buckingham Palace. End of story. What he's not doing, and he needs to do if he wants to have a slimmed-down monarchy, is cut all these people off who are receiving public money by the back door, because they all get some funds from the Duchy of Lancaster. They're tax-deductible expenses, although they have no connection with the Duchy of Lancaster. That's how the Queen dealt with it. No doubt Charles is doing the same thing. He needs to cut all these people out, follow the more European monarchies, who have got the head of state and partner next in line and their children, and that's it. And there's really no reason for a monarchy to have any more than that. He's not doing that, nor is he reforming the taxation arrangements, which are so beneficial to the royal family. He's actually making no changes. Meantime, he's continuing to fly in private jets and helicopters and all the other things he did before.
Even though he is supposed to be, I gather he's no longer a working royal. Like, what does that actually mean, and how are we still funding Andrew?
Well, I mean, working royals, a definition which they've given themselves for working royals, are those who attend fetes or other events and cut ribbons and turn up at events and say hello to people. That's what they mean by working. If you look at those so-called working royals, very few of them actually do very much work, inverted commas, at all. I mean, most of them attend events on less than half the days of the year. So I'm sure many of us who are in work would like to have a working arrangement which was so lackadaisical as that. However, that's what most of them do. So Andrew's no longer cutting ribbons and visiting places, so therefore he's no longer deemed to be a working royal. But the fact of the matter is that they are, as I mentioned, funded indirectly from the Duchy of Lancaster. They get the money from that source, and therefore that's a public expense indirectly, because Charles claims these expenses against tax. Now, that was changed in 2011 when the sovereign grant came in, because before that we had a civil list, and we used to see each year very transparently how much was being given to each member of the royal family. And the only reason it was changed to this new arrangement is in order to hide from the public at large how much these people are getting.
Wow. That is mad. I'm going to ask you more about the intricacies of the finances and how we're paying for a lot of the royals' duties. With Andrew, just to stay on the Epstein list for a little bit, I mean, he seems to be, am I right in saying, mentioned significantly more than even, I mean, people talk about Clinton, some people mention Trump and a few other names. It feels like Andrew's come up a lot more than anyone else. Was he just like the best buddy of Epstein?
He was certainly one of the best buddies of Epstein. And if you look at the address book that Epstein had, I mean, my word, it's the directory of the rich and famous across the world. I mean, you have to take your hat off in one sense to Epstein because he managed to accumulate all these people as contacts. And indeed, the address book he had included other people from this country, leading politicians from this country. So, I mean, he's managed to accumulate all these people. Now, Andrew appears a number of times. The phone book that Epstein had a different number for Andrew, a number of different numbers, including private numbers at Buckingham Palace and private numbers at Sandringham. So he was extremely close to Epstein. And, of course, he was very close to Ghislaine Maxwell, who, as we know, was convicted of acting effectively as a sort of person who secured and procured underage girls for Epstein.
This seems like a running pattern. I'm thinking of Savile as well, in terms of using the royals to gain status while hiding heinous crimes with underage people.
Yes, I think that's right. And it's not unusual to try to attach yourself to a very famous person because it gives you some protection from interference from the police or anyone else. Not legally, of course, but in terms of people not wanting to take a risk by pursuing matters. Savile, of course, was known to be engaging in grotesque behaviour back in the 1980s. I spoke to the leading lawyer for British Rail, because Savile used to be used by British Rail for their adverts, and British Rail dropped him in the 1980s because they had allegations put to them that Savile had been having procreation with their dead bodies in the morgue. And at that point, they dropped him. Now, that was in 1980-something, and yet it took till after his death before this came out. But the BBC, for example, knew about Savile because he was kept off Children in Need quite deliberately. And, of course, the BBC did nothing about it until ITV actually published or produced a programme on Savile. Now, as you say, he used the royal family. He became very close to Charles. He actually advised, this is unbelievable, really, he advised Charles and Diana on their marriage. He advised Charles and Camilla on their relationship. God knows how he felt qualified to do that. He was given personal gifts by Charles. Charles visited him in his cottage. And when he died, Charles and Camilla were the lead mourners for Savile. And Charles was warned about Savile a number of times, and he thought this was jealousy, and there's nothing wrong with the man. But, I mean, actually, Charles has shown some really bad judgment over the years, because Savile's not the only person of importance, if you like, who wanted to attach himself to Charles. We saw it with Kenneth Lay, the Enron guy, who got some coverage out of Charles, and eventually, of course, the thing went body up, put it that way.
Who's that?
It was Enron's big company in America, and Kenneth Lay was the chief executive, and the company was basically unsound. And Charles gave it some credibility by associating with Kenneth Lay, who invited him over to his place in America and everything else. So Charles has shown some bad judgments. He was also great friends with the Bishop of Lewis, as was Peter Ball, who admitted abusing boys. He had got a caution from the police for that. Charles continued to associate with him after he'd received a caution. And when it was put to him many years later, he said he didn't understand what a caution was. I find it very difficult to believe he didn't understand what a caution was.
So that leads to my next question then. With Andrew and Charles, is this the case sometimes of stupidity and ignorance, or not caring about the misdeeds of, say, Jeffrey Epstein?
I think it's willing to see people through the prism that you want to see them through, as opposed to the prism that actually exists, and not being prepared to listen to other people who have your best intentions at heart and are prepared to tell you the truth. To ignore that because it doesn't suit the image you've created in your own mind. But I mean, the reluctance of kings, if you like, or of dictators around the world to listen to advice is legendary, and quite often, of course, in medieval times and onwards, including with dictators now in different parts of the world, if they are told what they don't want to hear, then the person who tells them is quietly disposed of.